So I decided to make a video on how I made this cockpit coaming. It's quite a challenging piece of wood this, as it curves in two directions at the same time. I wanted it to be one single piece of wood if I could as well, so I thought I'd video the whole process and show you how I did it. So I started off with a bit of 50mm Sapele. Here it's sawn into two pieces, which I steamed for about an hour. But as you can see, I was having difficulties getting it to bend, so then I tried just the one piece on its own with some strapping. Still couldn't get it to bend to the radius, so what I decided to do is resaw these into four pieces. So I ended up with four pieces about 7.5mm thick. Steamed them again, and as you can see, it managed to curve round to the radius quite nicely. Still took a lot of force to get it in place. But it all went eventually. There's just a little shot there of the finished part cooling down. You just see the four laminations there. So the next thing was to take all the clamps off the next day after it cooled down. You can see there's quite a bit of spring back. And I'm just cutting the ends here so that they don't stick out past the jig, which you'll see in a minute that I use ratchet straps to pull it up tightly once it's glued, and I didn't want those sort of fouling on the ends. So I took all the parts out, just sort of remembering to number them so they all go back in order, otherwise they don't seem to want to sit in the same position. So I'm just brushing epoxy onto each piece now. Both sides of them. And then it's ready to start clamping up. So initially I'm just trying to close this up a little bit here so I can get the ratchet straps around and start to build some pressure with them. I like to use ratchet straps for these type of jigs just because they pull up nice and evenly all the way around. You can get quite a lot of force on them actually, and what I found is if you use clamps for this sort of thing, you tend to put like hard spots around the mould, so you'll have areas which have opened up slightly and other areas which are closed. The reason for the 3 clamps on the top of the jig is just to hold that area down because it's slightly flatter than the rest. And then I'm just putting the jig up on its side so I can clean up all the epoxy and make sure that nothing's run onto the jig too badly. And you can see all the layers there glued up. So on to the next day, taking it back out the mould. I think I left this a couple of days actually to make sure it's properly dry. You see it springs back just a tiny bit, but much less than it did when it was steamed. So I'm just cleaning up the edges now on the surface planer. Probably didn't really have to do this because I'm cutting a lot of this away anyway, but it was just easier to work with a nice flat piece with a good edge on it. So here's the cockpit coaming in place. You can see why I had to make it so tall now, so I could follow the contour of the deck, but I wasn't sure what that curve was going to be until I fitted the rest of the deck on. So now I've done all the rest of that, I could follow that line and trim it down to size. You can see it from the front of the boat. So what I'm going to do now is just roughly cut this down to height, just with a jigsaw, and then I'll bring it down flush with the deck with a block plane.
So I've roughly cut that down to shape, and it is very rough, I know, but next thing is going to be to get it flush with the deck. I think initially I might just do that with a belt sander actually, which is going to remove a lot of material quite quickly and allow me to get a bit closer to the shape of the deck. So that's roughly shaped now to the profile of the deck. I've still got a lot of fairing to do on the deck. This king plank's high either side, so that needs taking down, and that's why there's a bit of a flat spot there in the middle at the moment, but that'll be a constant curve eventually, and then I'll take the coaming down to suit. Okay, so the deck's nearly finished. I've pretty much faired everything now, as you can see, and the coaming's all shaped down so it matches that. So the next thing to do now is cut the bottom edge of the coaming. So the thickness that's on that side there will follow the coaming all the way around, and then the whole thing will be rounded top and bottom. So I'm just going to pick up the depth that I've got on this side with a marking gauge. So you can see the line that I marked with the gauge. It's nice and uniform all the way around. That's what I'll follow. Just rough cut out with the jigsaw, and then really just shape it, maybe with the belt sander like I did with the top side, and then we can round it off. Okay, so there's the bottom edge cut. What I've decided to do actually is keep that where that just increases in depth there. You can see the liner marked, but I think I'm actually going to just flare that out slightly so it matches into the seat back. I think that'll be nicer than shaping the bottom of the seat back, so I'm going to keep that just increasing and then a uniform depth all the way around. So the next stage is going to be to round this off top and bottom, and I'm just going to use a standard round over route bit for that. This is the biggest one I've got, and I think it'll be about right. So basically I'm going to cut that from the top down to there, and then cut it from the bottom. We should have enough flat surface in the middle just to hold that bearing guide still. And that will give us pretty much a complete round over on the coaming, which will be a nice soft edge to the cockpit. It should look pretty smart as well, so that's next. What I've done with this corner here is just left it like this at the moment. I'm going to shape all this by hand, I think, and just kind of flare this out into the back of the seat base. So I've just gone in as far as that for now, but the coaming's come out really nice. I'm really happy with it. So just a bit of shaping by hand, and then it's pretty much there. So there's the finished moulding. Not much left considering the size of wood that we started with, but a nice effect anyway. So there's a few little voids that we've got to fill. You can just see there where there was some voids in the laminations, so I'll put a bit of epoxy in those. So there you go, that's how I made the coaming that goes around the outside of the cockpit.
I hope you found it interesting. Next up I'm going to do a video on staining the decks and a complete varnish method for the whole boat as well, so stay tuned.